It started with a glance, just a fraction of a second, but it lingered far longer in her mind than it should have. Harper had always considered herself practical, grounded, the kind of woman who measured words before she spoke them and plans before she acted. Yet that single subtle glance from her boss, Mr. Calder, in the middle of a routine Wednesday meeting made her heart stutter in a way she could not quite explain. It was almost imperceptible, a tilt of his head, a brief softness in his otherwise sharp gaze. But to Harper, it was electric, confusing, and strangely comforting. She shook her head, trying to shake off the sensation. Meetings were never like this. She had been focused on numbers, charts, projections. She prided herself on seeing the facts, not reading into fleeting expressions. But as the meeting droned on, Harper found herself noticing everything about Mr. Calder in ways she had never noticed before. The way his fingers tapped rhythmically on the desk, the quiet exhale when he shifted papers, even the faint scent of his aftershave seemed unusually pronounced. She forced herself to scribble notes in her journal, pretending to focus, but her mind kept drifting. By the time the meeting ended, Harper's hands were slightly trembling. She packed her laptop with more care than usual, as if the simple act of putting it away could ground her racing thoughts. In the hallway, she passed colleagues chatting about lunch plans, presentations, deadlines. Their voices were a dull murmur behind the sudden loudness of her own awareness. Something had shifted, and she could not yet name what. Later that evening, as Harper walked home under the soft glow of streetlights, she replayed the moment over and over. She tried logically to dismiss it, telling herself it was nothing more than a fleeting professional gesture. But something about the tilt of his head, the way his words had lingered, felt like a secret she had been invited to witness. She couldn't explain why it affected her so strongly. Even the quiet hum of passing cars and the rustle of leaves in the gentle wind felt different, almost charged, as if the world itself was pointing her toward noticing details she had never cared to notice before. Her apartment smelled faintly of vanilla and old books, the comforting scent she associated with evenings spent alone with a journal and soft music. Harper made tea, wrapped herself in a shawl, and tried to refocus. But every time she closed her eyes, Mr. Calder's subtle expression flickered back into her mind. She caught herself wondering if he noticed, if he intended it, if she had imagined the meaning entirely. The questions twisted quietly, leaving her in a liminal state of anticipation and unease. Harper found herself walking to her window, staring out at the city skyline that shimmered under the night sky. There was a strange beauty in the ordinary lights, as if each tiny spark held a story she had not yet learned to read. And maybe, she thought, this was exactly what had changed. The way she heard and saw everything now, alert to subtleties she had once overlooked. The gentle cough of the radiator, the faint hum of her refrigerator, even the whisper of her own thoughts seemed layered with meaning. She returned to her journal, trying to write down the swirl of sensations, hoping that putting them on paper would clarify her mind. Instead, the sentences twisted, reflecting more questions than answers. She realized she had never paid such close attention to the way someone's quiet words could echo in her head, change her perception of time and space, and color ordinary moments with a tint of anticipation. Harper sipped her tea and felt the warmth spread, but it was not just the tea, it was the awareness, the heightened sensitivity to the subtle, unnoticed things. As the clock approached 12:15 a.m., Harper finally closed her journal and leaned back against her chair. She understood that tomorrow, when she returned to work, nothing would be quite the same. She would hear voices differently, notice the faintest inflections, catch the smallest gestures, and perhaps she would find herself waiting for another moment, another glance, another word that might change everything again. If you're enjoying this story so far, please like the video and subscribe for more heartfelt tales. Harper turned off her desk lamp, but sleep did not come easily. In the darkness, she could still see the tilt of his head, the subtle curve of his smile, And in her quiet room, the world suddenly felt alive with unspoken words and possibilities that hovered just out of reach. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, only that her perception of everything familiar had shifted. Harper woke with the faint hum of the city outside her window, sunlight creeping through the blinds, and the lingering memory of last night's awareness still pressing gently against her thoughts. She had dressed quickly, almost mechanically, pulling on her usual blazer and scarf, yet everything felt different. The office would be the same, of course. Neat desks, hum of computers, the steady rhythm of conversation. But for Harper, each sound now seemed layered, weighted, as if there was more to hear than she had ever noticed before. The walk to work was quiet. The morning air had a crispness that made her lungs expand in unexpected satisfaction, and she found herself attuned to tiny details: a dog barking across the street, a distant siren, the flutter of leaves against a brick wall. It was almost unsettling how much she heard, how much she absorbed. Harper told herself to focus on the practical, the tangible, reports, meetings, deadlines. But even as she entered the glass doors of her office building, the subtle shift lingered. Her senses felt sharper, her mind oddly alert to tones, gestures, pauses. Mr. Calder was at his desk when she arrived, sorting through paperwork with the same precision he always had. Harper noticed the faint crease of his brow when he frowned at a document, the soft tap of his pen against the wooden surface. And then their eyes met. That same flicker of awareness returned, subtle and quick, like a whisper of something unspoken. Harper shook her head gently, pretending to focus on her own work, though she could feel the tension in her chest, the pull of curiosity that made her ears strain to hear more than what was being said. The morning passed in a blur of activity. Harper presented her updates to the team, answered emails, and joined conference calls, all while feeling a heightened awareness of everything around her. Voices that once blended together now seemed to carry layers: stress, hesitation, humor, even fleeting doubt. She noticed how her colleagues' expressions shifted with the rhythm of conversation, how small gestures, a tilt of a head, a glance at a watch, revealed unspoken concerns. Harper realized she was listening differently, not just to words, but to the spaces between them, the subtle vibrations of human expression. Lunch came quietly. Harper retreated to the small courtyard behind the office, a place she often used to catch a moment of calm. The sunlight was gentle, filtered by trees that had already begun to shed their autumn leaves. She sipped her water and let herself breathe, but her mind wandered, replaying every detail from the morning. Mr. Calder's subtle attentions, the tone of his brief greetings, the quiet way he acknowledged her presence. It was all different now, layered with meaning she could not yet fully interpret. She wondered if he even realized how much a simple glance could affect someone, how deeply it could unsettle the ordinary flow of a day. Her phone buzzed, a message from a friend, casual and cheerful, but Harper barely saw the words. She was too wrapped up in the way every sound and motion around her seemed charged. Even the distant laughter of other employees walking to the cafeteria felt like part of a rhythm she had only just begun to understand. It was intoxicating, this awareness, and frightening too. She was caught in a new kind of alertness, where ordinary words and gestures carried unseen weight. By mid-afternoon, Harper found herself in a meeting with Mr. Calder. They were reviewing project timelines, and he leaned slightly closer to point at a graph on her screen. His voice was calm, professional, but Harper noticed the faintest pause before he spoke, as if he were weighing his words. She realized that she could hear not just what was said, but how it was meant, and how it resonated beyond the meeting room. Every sentence seemed to echo in her mind, leaving impressions that refused to fade. The project discussion became secondary to the quiet awareness between them, a space filled with unspoken attention. When the meeting ended, Harper lingered at her desk longer than usual. She reviewed her notes with meticulous care, trying to capture the fleeting sensations she was now acutely aware of. She understood that her perception of people, words, and moments had shifted, that the subtle comment, the subtle glance, had opened a door she could not close. And yet, she also felt a twinge of anxiety. What if noticing too much changed her, changed the relationships she had always trusted? That evening, Harper walked home slowly, her senses alert to every step, every sound. The city had taken on a new texture: distant conversations, faint smells of coffee, the whisper of wind through alleyways. She realized she was not merely observing anymore. She was participating in a delicate dance of perception, a heightened attention to the subtleties of life that had always been there, but hidden. And through it all, the memory of Mr. Calder's soft glance lingered, a quiet anchor in the sea of newfound awareness. Harper opened her apartment door and paused, the faint hum of the refrigerator and the rustle of the curtains sounding louder than usual. She felt the first stirrings of wonder mixed with caution. Her world had changed, and she was only beginning to understand how much she had shifted along with it. Harper's mornings had become quieter, yet somehow louder at the same time. The city outside her window remained unchanged. Buses rattling along familiar streets, people hurrying to offices, birds fluttering between trees. But Harper noticed each detail with a new clarity. Every sound, every movement seemed to carry more meaning. The subtle comment from Mr. Calder still echoed in her mind, shaping the way she heard everything. It was as if the world had become a conversation, with nuances and undercurrents she could no longer ignore. At work, she felt the shift most profoundly. Colleagues spoke in ways she had once thought ordinary, yet now each tone and inflection seemed layered. Even casual greetings felt intimate in a new sense. The slight hesitation in a coworker's "good morning" hinted at worries they hadn't yet voiced. Harper found herself reading the pauses in sentences with the same careful attention she once gave to numbers and charts. Her awareness made her both empathetic and cautious. She didn't want to misinterpret, yet she couldn't stop noticing. Mr. Calder's presence had grown even more significant in her days. He remained professional, courteous, and impeccably polite, but Harper noticed how his subtle attentions lingered. A nod here, a fleeting smile there, small gestures that could have gone unnoticed, but now resonated deeply. She caught herself replaying every interaction in her mind, analyzing every nuance. Each glance, every inflection, seemed to carry an unspoken understanding, though she wasn't sure what exactly it meant. During one particular afternoon, Harper was called into his office to review quarterly projections. She entered cautiously, carrying her notes with practiced calm, yet her heart carried a quiet tension. Mr. Calder motioned her to sit, and for a moment, silence stretched between them. Harper noticed the softness in his expression, the careful way he listened. Her ears picked up the faint scratch of his pen as he made notes, the gentle exhale he let out when reading her numbers. It was a meeting about projections, yes, but Harper realized she was focused less on the work and more on the rhythm of his presence. "Your attention to detail is impressive, Harper," he said, his voice steady but unusually deliberate. "It's rare to see someone notice not just the numbers, but the trends hidden in them." Harper nodded, feeling a warmth that she couldn't quite define. It was a simple compliment, professional in nature, yet somehow it resonated with her newfound sensitivity. She had begun to recognize how much meaning lived beneath ordinary words, and Mr. Calder's comments seemed to validate the way she had started perceiving the world. She left the office that day with her usual stack of papers, yet she felt lighter, as if the recognition had released something quietly tense inside her. The evening brought a stroll through the park, a routine Harper had adopted to unwind. Leaves crunched under her shoes, a gentle breeze brushed her cheeks, and distant children's laughter punctuated the quiet. She realized she no longer walked blindly through her days. She was listening, noticing, absorbing. Conversations she passed on park benches hinted at hopes and anxieties, and she understood them without needing context. It was both exhilarating and slightly unnerving. Harper wondered if this heightened awareness was a gift or a challenge, one she was not yet equipped to fully navigate. By the time she reached her apartment, the sun had dipped low, leaving the sky painted in gentle hues of pink and orange. Harper paused at her doorway, taking in the stillness. She knew her perception had changed. that every ordinary sound now carried a quiet weight, and every glance held potential significance. And still, through it all, Mr. Calder lingered in her thoughts, not as a distraction, but as the subtle catalyst who had shifted the way she experienced the world. Later that night, Harper sat by her window, journal in hand, trying to capture the current of emotions swirling inside her. She found that words failed her. The layers of sound and meaning she now perceived resisted simplification. Each sentence she wrote seemed to fall short, unable to fully convey the quiet tension and wonder she carried. Harper understood that she was learning a new language, the language of subtleties, the quiet exchanges of expression that often went unnoticed. And as she closed her journal, she realized that the transformation was only beginning. She would wake tomorrow hearing differently, noticing differently, understanding differently. The world had expanded in ways she could not yet name, and the anticipation of what she might uncover next filled her with both excitement and apprehension. The following morning, Harper awoke with a quiet resolve. The subtle shift in her perception had settled into a kind of rhythm now. She could feel it in every movement, hear it in every sound. Even the alarm clock, which once merely signaled the start of her day, now seemed to vibrate with nuance, each tick and chime carrying its own subtle weight. Harper dressed carefully, choosing colors that felt soothing, yet she felt almost as if she were preparing for something unspoken, a day that might hold more significance than the ordinary. At work, the office buzzed with the familiar hum of printers, phones, and whispered conversations, but Harper noticed more than ever before. She could distinguish the stress in a coworker's voice when asking a question, detect subtle excitement in the words of another when they shared a small success. Her heightened awareness extended to her surroundings too, the faint scent of coffee in the break room, the distant scrape of a chair against tile, the low murmur of voices in another department. Harper had begun to realize that the world was speaking in a language she had only recently learned to understand. Mr. Calder appeared in the conference room just as she finished setting up her notes. His presence always commanded attention, but now Harper found herself attuned to the subtle rhythms of his movements. A gentle shift in posture, the quiet tap of his pen, the faint exhale before he spoke. Everything seemed charged with unspoken meaning. Today, though, there was something different. A slight hesitation before he addressed her, a weight to his words that made her lean forward instinctively, eager to catch the nuance. "Harper," he began, his voice calm yet deliberate, "I'd like your input on how we approach the new client project. Your insights have been quite perceptive lately." The word perceptive settled in her chest like a soft pulse. It was a simple comment, professional and appropriate, yet Harper felt the quiet significance behind it. He had noticed her attention to subtle details, and the recognition stirred something inside her, validation, awareness, and a flicker of connection she had not anticipated. She shared her thoughts carefully, noting every inflection in his responses, the brief pause before he asked a follow-up question, the subtle acknowledgement in his eyes. Throughout the day, Harper's awareness deepened further. Even routine conversations felt layered now, each word a window into unspoken feelings. She found herself interpreting not just what people said, but how they felt as they said it. It was a delicate balance. Too much focus could feel intrusive, yet not paying attention felt almost impossible. Harper understood that she had crossed a threshold where ordinary moments carried unexpected resonance, where subtlety was no longer something to overlook. During a quiet break in the late afternoon, Harper retreated to the small rooftop garden behind the building. The sky was brushed with streaks of soft lavender and orange, the air warm with the fading sun. She sat on a bench and let herself breathe, feeling the world vibrate around her in tiny, meaningful ways. Even the faint rustle of leaves seemed to speak a language she could now comprehend. It was as if the universe had expanded in her perception, offering secrets she could not have noticed before. As dusk approached, Harper returned to her office, but the sense of anticipation lingered. She caught herself wondering if she would ever stop noticing, if the heightened awareness would settle or continue to intensify. Mr. Calder's subtle influence remained a constant undercurrent, shaping the way she listened, the way she interpreted every quiet moment. Harper felt a strange mix of comfort and tension, a knowing that something had shifted, yet uncertainty about what lay ahead. When the day ended, Harper stepped outside and inhaled the cool evening air. Lights glimmered from nearby buildings, the city alive with its usual rhythm, yet she heard it differently now. Conversations in distant offices, footsteps echoing down streets, even the faint murmur of the wind through trees seemed layered with meaning. Harper realized she could no longer return to the ordinary way of hearing the world. Everything was amplified, everything mattered, and she was learning how to navigate this newfound clarity, this sensitivity that left her both exhilarated and cautiously uneasy. That night, Harper sat once more by her window, journal in hand. She wrote slowly, trying to capture the subtle music of everyday life that had become her constant companion. Each entry reflected her growing awareness, her quiet observations, and the lingering presence of Mr. Calder's subtle guidance in her perception. She felt a soft thrill of curiosity for what tomorrow might reveal, for how much further her sensitivity could reach. And just as she closed her journal, a faint sound outside caught her attention. A soft voice, unfamiliar yet warm, speaking in tones she could almost understand, carrying meaning she could not yet decipher. Harper leaned forward, heart quickening with both anticipation and wonder, aware that her world was about to shift again in ways she had not yet imagined. The morning air was crisp as Harper stepped out, carrying her journal and a quiet sense of expectation. The city felt alive in ways it hadn't before. Every distant conversation, the faint echo of footsteps, even the hum of traffic seemed layered with intention. She had begun to realize that her sensitivity to subtle shifts in tone and gesture had become a lens through which she could experience the world more deeply. Even ordinary moments, once unnoticed, now carried a rhythm and meaning she could not ignore. At work, Harper moved with her usual calm efficiency, yet she noticed the little things: colleagues exchanging fleeting expressions, the tension in someone's voice when pressed with a question, the faint contentment in another's smile when a task was completed. She understood now that hearing and observing were intertwined. One could not exist fully without the other. And amidst it all, Mr. Calder's presence lingered in the corners of her awareness. His subtle guidance had taught her to notice what was often overlooked, to listen not just for words, but for their resonance, their unspoken intentions. During the afternoon, Harper was asked to prepare a presentation for a new client. She gathered her notes and diagrams carefully, yet her mind remained attuned to the nuances in the office around her. Mr. Calder offered his support in quiet professional gestures, reviewing a point here, nodding to a detail there, but it was enough. Harper realized that the lessons she had absorbed over the past days were now fully integrated. She could anticipate questions, sense unspoken concerns, and respond with insight that felt natural and precise. By mid-afternoon, the client meeting began. Harper presented with a confidence she hadn't fully recognized in herself, yet each word was informed by her heightened awareness. She noted the client's subtle shifts, tiny adjustments in posture, a brief tightening of a hand, a flicker of expression, and addressed them instinctively, offering clarity and reassurance without missing a beat. The conversation flowed seamlessly, the clients responded positively, and Harper felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. It wasn't just about the presentation, it was about hearing the world in a way she had never known she could. Later, after the clients left, Harper stayed behind to organize her notes. Mr. Calder approached, his expression calm, measured, yet touched with a subtle warmth she had begun to recognize. "You've handled that beautifully," he said, his voice low, precise. "It's remarkable how you've tuned into the nuances others often overlook. I think you'll find that this skill will continue to shape the way you experience everything around you." Harper felt a quiet surge of understanding. It wasn't about him or even about recognition. It was about the shift in herself, the new way of listening and perceiving that had grown stronger with each passing day. She realized that subtle gestures, brief words, and fleeting glances could hold immense weight. Her world had transformed, and with it, her sense of connection to others had deepened. As she left the office and stepped into the fading light of early evening, Harper noticed the gentle patterns of the city, the rhythm of traffic, the laughter of strangers walking nearby, the whisper of wind against buildings. She felt present in a way that was both grounding and expansive. The heightened awareness that had once made her feel tentative now offered her clarity and confidence. She could hear life's quiet messages, interpret them with care, and embrace the depth of what had once seemed ordinary. Returning home, Harper sat by her window and reflected on the past days. The shift had begun with a subtle comment, a brief moment of attention, and yet it had changed how she experienced everything. She realized that noticing small gestures, listening deeply, and observing the unnoticed rhythms of life could reveal layers of understanding she had never imagined. Her perception had evolved, and with it, a quiet strength had grown within her. That night, Harper opened her journal and wrote one last entry of reflection. She described the world she now inhabited, a world filled with delicate signals, unspoken meanings, and subtle truths. She wrote about the lessons she had learned, the beauty of heightened perception, and the quiet joy of discovering that ordinary moments could carry extraordinary resonance. As the lights of the city shimmered outside her window, Harper felt a gentle sense of completion. The subtle comment that had changed her perception had guided her into a deeper understanding of herself and the world around her. And in the quiet of midnight, she realized that she would never hear, see, or experience life in quite the same way again. The world was alive with whispers, gestures, and subtle meanings, and she was finally listening fully. Harper closed her journal, a soft smile touching her lips. The city continued its gentle hum, but now she met it with an awareness and gratitude that made every sound, every movement, and every glance feel vivid, meaningful, and profoundly alive.